So you might have heard that earlier this year, OpenAI released DALL-E 2. Now, this is a magic AI tool, and it draws what you tell it to. So if I type the open palm of a human hand holding a heart-shaped red jewel, I get freshly generated images that match that text. And it's really hard to not be excited about stuff like this, right? This is technology with a capital T. It gives people the ability to do something that probably most of us fundamentally couldn't do without it. As long as we're not sticklers, about what human faces or hands or language looks like. Now, you've probably been told that AI has a problem with bias. So if we ask this to draw a photo of a profession like a lawyer, it's likely to reflect a Western media's bias about what that might look like, an older white man. What's more revealing for us in global health, though, I think, is asking it to produce an image of a professional OSHA health worker. It's a job that's held by about 1 million women. Not just to see that the outputs are incorrect or problematic, but to understand why, and what that illustrates about the fundamental nature of what AI is, and why you need to know it. Now, I'm not an AI expert, but I understand these tools well enough to have contributed code to their code bases, so I'll try to give you a really high-level view of what's going on here. DALL-E 2 uses a technique called latent diffusion to produce an image. And since this is an AI technique, it's not code alone that lets it turn text into pixels. In addition to the algorithm, it needs a big trained data model to function. In this case, that model is a big neural network. And it knows how to encode the details of images that are broken down into little pieces or features. And they train that model by taking an example image and degrading it with random noise, little by little by little, to teach the network to learn how to predict what internal features of an image to associate with the descriptive text provided with the image. Then you just spend $600,000 to do that with 5 billion more images. That new model lets us build an image by asking the network to run in reverse, by guessing what tweaks are going to make noise look a little more like the features it recognizes from the text that it was given. And that's something I really want you to understand about this system, and about what AIs are and how they learn. The network isn't taking this training data to inform some clear representation of the world. It's taking it to have an even better array of images to draw features from to spit back out. The way people describe bias in data as a limiter for AI's performance, it can evoke the idea that the AI software is representing some fundamental ground truth, that problems with some of the data that it depends on are polluting that truth. But that's nonsense, because the data is the system. The software, the code, it's just a vehicle for expressing it. The AI model data, it's not just the medium, it's the message. Because there are insights we can take away about AI once we understand that framing. Like understanding that AI technology's core capabilities, they're not really intentional. Advances in AI, they're a lot more like drug discovery than designing a new kind of database. Researchers combine data sets and new techniques, and they almost kind of mine those to see what they're able to do. And they can be a lot less generalizable than it can seem from the outside. The standard narrative for how one of these diffusion generators work, for instance, is that they not only know how to draw a giraffe and a cowboy, but a silly idea, like a cowboy riding a giraffe, and implying that the AI is understanding these concepts in some fundamental way, that it's remixing them at will. But to disabuse you of that notion, here's what the same generator produces when you ask it to draw a cowboy standing underneath a giraffe. And if the disparity surprises you there, I want you to remember it the next time someone claims that an AI can do anything that they haven't specifically demonstrated to you. There's this strong inherent bias in the kind of tasks we ask AI to perform and what kind of data already exists. With a quick look, I was actually able to find more than 12 photos in the training data set for that tool of people riding giraffes. Remember, AI systems, they're data systems first. More often than not, their impressive capabilities are more the result of the impressive amount of data in them that they've encoded, that humans produced or captured, rather than some ability to recontextualize it. That's important because those data sets, they have limitations, as we've seen, and AI systems, they encode them and they hide them. DALL-E 2 doesn't publicly reveal the source of their training data, but another really similar generator does. Do you want to guess what it is? That's right. It's the entire public internet, or at least the parts of it that were easy for researchers to just go and download. And unsurprisingly, that means that these systems, they contain a significant amount of problematic content, but I think it's even more important to understand what these unintentional, opportunistic approaches to data leave out. As an example, when OpenAI was releasing DALL-E 2, they publicly noted the biases I opened with, like the tendency to reflect only white men as lawyers, along with some tweaks they had made to improve the inclusivity of the outputs. But something I hope you can see from these results is that their tweaks and their tuning couldn't overcome the limits of the underlying data, where women aren't sufficiently represented, say, realistically in context as software developers, but seemingly from bland stock photos with creepy descriptions. Trying to address the system rather than the data here, it doesn't overcome its limitations, it just hides them behind a futuristic tokenism. And what's especially troubling to me is that these AI systems, their limitations end up encoded at multiple levels. Because when you see the code or the model hosting page for an AI system, the first thing you see is this big warning. This system was trained on a bunch of data from the internet or a pile of AI researchers. So it's full of biases. Don't use it for anything. Oh, and also, we know you can probably use this to do horrible things, so pretty please don't. But there's a challenge here for researchers who are looking to build the next AI system, because to work, something like a diffusion generator, it needs to be able to do things like infer meaning from human text or filter out explicit content from 5 billion poorly tagged images. And those are big problems that right now you can only solve with AI. So when we think about challenges or risks or limitations, we're not talking about tuning or tweaking or fixing one system. There's an entire hidden stack of these problems that are being amplified. And I earnestly believe that researchers, they're being honest when they say they understand how serious these problems are. But they're viewed as a tomorrow problem by the commercial actors who are looking to use their research. Last year, one researcher identified that the trained GPT-3 language model is so problematic that when it's asked to generate prompts about Muslims, it included violence in a staggering 66% of the results. That same year, Microsoft released offerings that used it, despite no specific realistic evidence that that kind of problem can be overcome while retaining the value of that model. Companies just see too much promise in the winners from AI tech to hold themselves back. And that should scare everyone in this room especially, because digital health's contribution involves working with people who aren't well served by commercial technology. And AI systems pose huge risks for communities who are already excluded from digital ecosystems. Because their value and their dangers, they're self-reinforcing from data's availability. Companies, they start with these huge existing data sets to create initial models to back their features that when they work do great things like index and group your photos based on who's in them. And when those features work, users adopt them and they naturally make improvements to the data while they're tagging them and making them work better. And that improved data, it feeds back into the next iteration of that model, tailoring it to work even better for the people for whom it was working for initially. For winners, that's a great cycle of improvement and value. But for someone on the outside, every step just reinforces their exclusion. Someone who wasn't using the tool already isn't included in the training data. So when the features perform poorly for them and they're not using them, they contribute even less to those data sets in the future for iteration. When it comes to AI, I'm not personally all that worried about Skynet or Terminators or singularities. I'm concerned about a banal reality of a new class of tech that just doesn't work for lots of people, while everybody pretends that it does. So what can we do about this? Well, we can start by holding ourselves accountable for understanding AI's risks and limitations, not generally as technology, but specifically as it pertains to those technologies. And we should recognize that there are responsible AI systems experts in our field, and they're often left to communicate the complexity and nuance like this of AI work against unrealistic expectations. Well-tailored AI systems, they have potential to open up spaces for digital transformation for us, but they're especially vulnerable to problematic outcomes from underinvestment and deployment or sustainability. And those are both already really big challenges in our industry. Amplifying the voices of these experts in cost and complexity, they can really help inform a more valuable role in ensuring that it's deployed responsibly. And one of those messages is that we should be using our voices and our positions to demand that AI technologies have proved their fit and their value and their viability, not just abstractly, but for where they are intended to be used. We shouldn't assume that AI systems that were built with data that doesn't represent the faces or languages or settings of our users or the beneficiaries are going to serve their needs. When AI systems are developed, we have a right to know what data was used to train them, what success looks like, and how our users and beneficiaries are going to be part of one of those cycles of improvement and not one of those cycles of disenfranchisement. And honestly, based on the paths we've seen for how AI is being built and deployed, we have a lot to gain from going on the offensive here. We should recognize that organizations that are working at the periphery of technology's reach, we have an early opportunity to support the safe and ethical creation of large-scale data sets that can increase the representation of global contexts. And I know that feels like it might go against the impulses from the last decade about privacy and compartmentalization, but this is a real frontier where there's need and alignment and funding potential, not for producing solutions, but for setting the stage for a more equitable future. And finally, we should be aware that everyday tools over the next few years, they're likely to encode deeper and deeper layers of assumptions about people and contexts that are just nothing like ours. From phone cameras to decisions about whether login attempts were legitimate, over time, we should expect consumer technology to just be less and less useful for us, to be ready to fill the gaps. Just like commercial technology abandoning the need to work offline forced us to build our own offline-first infrastructure. Because there's this entire astroturfed industry of independent AI ethics, and it exists to convince you that there's this ponderous reflection and lists of principles that are going to prevent this disenfranchisement rather than excuse it. You might hope that these companies funding the R&D and benefiting from this technology, that they plan on fixing literally any of these problems that they're so candid about communicating. And you know what? Me too. But I'm not going to hold my breath. Thank you for your time.